Well, Chancellor Woodson, thank you so much for doing this.
Sure.
I genuinely really appreciate it. And I want the goal of it to be just getting more information out. We
Sure.
are inundated by people wanting information, just like I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
I guess we can kind of start at the beginning. So we know that NC State closed Poe Hall, or tested Poe Hall, after several employees raised concerns about the potential increased rate of cancer at Poe Hall. When were you first made aware of those concerns?
I was made aware the first week of November.
Okay, so that's pretty late.
Well, that's when I was made aware.
Right,
Yeah.
and so it just kind of shows that it took maybe some time to get it to you. When did you hear about the decision to close Poe Hall, or were you a part of that?
Well,
decision?
since I made the decision, I heard about it right away, Keely.
Okay.
I understood when I learned that we had tested and found early evidence of PCBs in the building, again, the first week of November, that the backstory, which is why we had been doing the testing and why there had been employees raising concerns. This is a large university, and we have a phenomenal environmental health and safety group here, and they're evaluating the health and safety of buildings constantly. And so it's not unusual that I would not have heard about it until there was a decision that had to be made. And so they came to me in early November, and my leadership team, and said that we had found these early indications of PCBs in the building, and that they were doing some subsequent testing, and those results would be coming in the next few days or week. And when those results came back and we found evidence, additional evidence of PCBs in the building, my leadership team and I got together and we made the decision, again, out of an abundance of caution. Throughout this time, our environmental health and safety team had been reaching out to DHHS and others in this space to get a sense of what we should be doing. No one asked us to close the building. There was no regulatory agency suggesting that we close the building. But I knew that for us to be able to do the critical testing necessary to understand what the environment truly was and to understand whether that had any implications for health, that we were going to have to do a lot of testing. And that would be disruptive to the lives of people in the building, not to mention result in a lot of concern. So we made the very difficult decision, again, out of an abundance of caution, to close the building. And that's not an easy decision to make when you have a building as large as Poe Hall. But yes, we did make that decision.
Are you concerned about the health of the people who spent time in Poe Hall?
I'm concerned about the health of every employee of our university. So certainly I'm concerned about anyone's health at our university, but I'm equally concerned, and more importantly, value the science behind the environment within the building. So in order to be able to fully engage with people about health implications, we have to have questions answered about the environment within the building. And I knew that would take significant testing. And so, yes, I'm very concerned about anyone's health, particularly anyone that's been diagnosed with a serious illness as serious as cancer. But having said that, it's most important that we give them the information that they need to understand if there is any connection to their health.
Okay. In 2018, the exterior tested very high for PCBs.
Yeah.
If you could go back, would you have taken things a step further and tested the interior? I mean, the information was there, at least on the exterior.
Yeah, and that's true for a number of buildings, because the truth is that EPA for many years has had guidelines around testing, particularly caulk, that is used around windows. And anytime we're going into a building built in that generation and looking to renovate the building, looking to remove windows or replace caulking, out of following EPA guidelines, we go in and evaluate whether there are PCBs in the caulk. And so there have been PCBs detected in the exterior caulking around windows in a number of buildings at the university. But that's never been led to or even required to look at the internal environment within the building.
Were the PCBs in the caulking exterior removed?
I don't know the answer to that because it was part of a test, whether there were present or not. I think in this case the windows were not replaced because we're still looking to get all the funds together for the renovation. But it did inform us if they were removed how we would have to handle the material.
I want to quickly shift gears to the federal health investigation. You had said yourself many times that you reopened or asked NIOSH to reopen the investigation after you had the test results in hand. Well, these are two memos from the CDC from January 22nd, and they show that the discussion was had around that time, end of January, to no longer have the health investigation active. The testing was done in the December 22nd. Why would you have the testing done, then call off the health investigation, only to reopen it 2 weeks later after the results
Keely,
were back?
you've seen our letter to NIOSH. You've seen I mean, you've reported on it. It's on your website. So we, in fact, did not ask NIOSH to stop an investigation. We told NIOSH that we were in the process of testing the building. It was made clear to us by people we were talking to, and I wasn't part of these conversations, but it's been reported to me that it was clear in our conversations with NIOSH that they would like to get these test results, and that when those test results began to come in, reach back out to them and initiate the conversation. And as soon as we got the first test results back, we did just that.
152 people, I know the university is not collecting this information, but 152 people who say they worked or studied in Poe Hall have reported that they have cancer. 59 of those are breast cancer cases. And it doesn't, that 152 doesn't count the reproductive, cognitive issues, benign tumors, and then the concerns that Poe Hall employees' children developed and developmental and health issues after being exposed to chemicals in utero and through breast milk. Now, all of those things go far beyond the health concerns, as you've called it. What do you have to say to those people right now?
Well, as I've said to you earlier in this interview, any health diagnosis or any, particularly a diagnosis as consequential as cancer, is devastating to an individual and their family. I understand that. And so we feel very responsible for understanding the environment within the building so that individuals and their healthcare providers can understand if there's a relationship between the building environment, and we don't have that information at this time. And so we feel a responsibility to make sure that we're evaluating the building, we're doing all the testing necessary so that we can give that information to employees and to their families so that they can have the appropriate conversations with their healthcare providers.
I have one current employee who knew we were doing this interview, and she said this to me. They prioritized work and protecting themselves from liability, speaking of the university, over addressing employee concerns. It's so dehumanizing, and it minimizes the struggles we've been through. That's a current employee here. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I think the most important thing is that if we didn't value the health of the employees in the university, we wouldn't have closed the building down and began to evaluate the building so that we could provide the appropriate information. So clearly we value the health and safety of our employees in all of our buildings, and we're working really hard to understand the environment and understand what the environment has been like over these years so that we can provide the appropriate information back to employees.
I think a lot of current students who were in that building are concerned, even if they're healthy right now. We know that you can get tests, they might not be conclusive, but people can get tests for PCBs to see if they have high levels in their system. I have some instances of students going to university health and the campus health not being equipped to do those kinds of tests. Would you ever consider having the university partner with an outside group that could do those tests?
Well, we're partnering right now with NIOSH, and we're going to follow the lead of NIOSH in terms of they're doing a full health hazard evaluation of the building. And depending on the results of that, if there are recommendations that employees should be tested in certain ways, then we'd consider that at the time. But at this point, our focus is really on the environment within the building so that we understand. Keely, I'm a scientist. I tend to make decisions based on the availability of data and information. And at this point, we don't have the data and information on the building, and we're working to get that so that we can provide the appropriate information back to our employees and students that studied in the building for years.
But it's been 4 months since the building was closed. I think if people, there's so much anxiety around the fact of like, was I exposed? Am I going to get sick?
And we're working on it as quickly as we can.
When do you think people will get answers, and what kind of concrete health answers do you think you're going to be able to provide?
Well, I'm not a healthcare provider, and I'm certainly not a physician. My PhD is in plant biology, so I'm not sure I'm the person that can answer that question. I can tell you that we can't answer questions about individuals' health until we know the environment that they were exposed to. And at this point, we don't.
A building expert we spoke to said 30 samples in one room is really needed to understand the sources of PCBs and exposure. Geosyntec's testing does not come anywhere close to that. I mean,
well, we've done one phase of testing, Keely, so let's not evaluate the thoroughness of the testing until we're done.
How many tests then, or how many samples do you expect them to take, and when do you expect the testing to be done?
They're in the process of testing right now, and I expect the testing to be done toward the end of April.
How quickly after that do you expect any concrete answers?
That's when I expect the concrete answers.
Okay, that's great. I want to point to some language that was in the Geosyntec report from February. It's, I'm just going to hand it to you just so you can see. This is after the first round of their testing and ahead of the March testing, which I assume is taking place right now. It says that before the HVAC system is turned back on for that testing, Geosyntec may, quote, replace or encapsulate portions of mechanical systems or clean. Now, many people reading that felt that it sounded like sources of PCBs in Poe Hall could be mitigated before the final testing. Did that happen?
Yeah. No.
Have any PCBs or sources been removed since the building was closed?
I can't answer that, Keely. I mean, Geosyntec is in the building testing right now, so I know that they're in the business.
You can't answer if anything's been removed? Well, I want to ask the Chancellor directly.
I'm not in the middle of testing. I know that Geosyntec is in the middle of their testing. I'm not sure. I mean, they are removing things from the building that are being tested. They're removing samples from the building, but we're not moving things out of the building, if that's your point.
Has anything been cleaned up?
I don't believe anything's been cleaned up. I mean, I know that as they go through and they test and they create dust associated with testing, because this HVAC system is complicated because it's built into the infrastructure of the building.
Right.
It's literally inside the concrete of the building. So they have to drill to get into it. And so as they drill to get into it, there may be some cleaning up from dust associated with that, but we're not cleaning the building.
There's just concern that the environment that people were working and learning
We're not manipulating the environment to get the testing. We're testing to understand the environment.
Okay. Why hasn't the university allowed any other agencies into Poe Hall?
We're the building owner. It's critical for us to evaluate the building and understand what the nature of the building is so that we can, number one, help our employees and their families understand what they've been exposed to, if anything, throughout this. And number two, develop mitigation strategies, because this is a very large building. And we need to be in a position so that when we're done with this work, we can work with EPA to make sure that the building can be reoccupied and renovated to be reoccupied.
Do you see that happening in the future? People going back into the building?
Yes. I mean, but I don't know that. I mean, I don't have the answers, Keely. I don't know what's the source. I don't know how significant the source is, how expensive it will be to retrofit the building, to mitigate the source, all the renovations that will be required, and all of those things will be considered when we make decisions about the future of the building.
NC State has been on the record several times saying they're not going to just blanket test all the buildings for PCBs now. But the EPA says that if a building was built between the 50s and 80s, it probably does have PCBs in it. I just want to read you some of the...
I mean, the short answer, Keely, is we're going to follow the guidelines of a federal agency. EPA has no guidelines about interior testing of buildings unless you're going through the process of renovation and removing material that's suspected to have PCBs in it. You probably know that EPA only recently came out with new guidelines, February 24th to be precise.
Right.
And those guidelines now for the first time actually talk about the process of testing for and potentially removing material that has PCBs in it. So I've instructed our Department of Health and Environmental Safety now to go back, reevaluate all of our protocols associated with renovation and repair, and make sure that we're consistent with the new EPA guidelines. And that's going on right now.
But there's so many people who have this anxiety now, given what's happened or we think may have happened at Poe Hall. These are buildings that were built between 5 years of Poe Hall, Sullivan Hall, Bone Hall, Metcalf, Carroll Hall. These are all student residence buildings. Why not test them?
Again, we're going to develop the protocols where we're testing in a way that makes sense, that's consistent with what people believe. This is an evolving science. I mean, right now, EPA is just now starting to come out with guidelines around PCBs in interior space. And there still are no requirements for testing. That doesn't mean we won't test. Historically, we've always, anytime there are concerns that people are expressing concerns about a building, which is why we did what we did this time to Poe, that we'll go in and try to evaluate it. And now we have new guidelines from EPA that will help direct that work. And we will. As we develop the protocols around those guidelines, we'll go in and make sure we understand the environment.
Why wait to test, though?
Because we don't know the environment within Poe Hall. We don't know the source. We don't know how it got there, but we're going to know. And when we do, that'll help inform the way we behave with all of the other buildings going forward.
But you tested Poe
I've
Hall.
answered your question, Keely.
You did. I'm asking another. You tested Poe Hall in October and November, and within a month it was closed. So you could act fast if there was a problem somewhere else.
And we're not aware of a problem somewhere else.
Okay. WRAL, and I imagine many other news agencies, have asked for the records of the last 10 years of any time NC State has tested for PCBs on the campus. You have yet to release those. Why not release that?
I can't answer that. I mean, I know our public records office is overwhelmed with requests. There's no reason why we wouldn't release them, so I'm not sure where they are in the process.
This is a receipt for PCB testing from 2023 for this building.
Yeah.
You have yet to release those results publicly. It's just the receipt showing testing was done. Sir, do you know if your office in the building, do you know what the results were?
I don't. I mean, I'm sure that there was, every time we're testing to repair a window or to replace a window, we test for PCBs and caulking. And it's not because we're necessarily concerned about the exterior of the building, but we're concerned to make sure that if we're removing material, we're removing it in a way that's consistent with EPA guidelines.
Obviously, as you've mentioned, testing is expensive. Is that really the biggest barrier to test?
$480 is not a barrier.
So again, why not test other buildings? So many people have
I've answered the question, Keely. We're going to test other buildings when we understand what gave rise to
Why do you need to know the situation in Poe Hall in order to test other buildings that were built around the same time?
We're going to follow EPA guidelines.
But you said yourself there really isn't much guidelines in the EPA for testing inside. You're a flagship university and very, very well regarded. Why not use this Poe Hall situation as an opportunity to set a template for other institutions that may go through this?
We are.
How do you feel that you are?
Well, we are by helping them understand how to evaluate the current guidelines coming from EPA. We're sort of the first to go through this among all the state agencies, actually. So our group has been in constant communication with other universities in the UNC system and with other state agencies. This has not been standard protocol, Keely, for any university or any campus or any state agency to test for PCBs, other than what we've always done, again, maybe more so than many, to test for PCBs in caulking around windows, because we knew it was used frequently in caulking. And that's been really to make sure that when we're removing a window or we're replacing caulking, that we're disposing of that appropriately. And we're protecting the health of the workers that are removing it or applying it.
You say, we can't act on things until we really know. And I can feel in your answers that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that you think that you're moving as quickly as you can to get these answers. We have so many examples of, like I've shown you, the EPA not being able to get a hold of NC State.
I'm not aware of that. I've told you that.
Well, I just showed it to you.
Well, yeah, but that's the first I've seen of it.
I want to show you this. This is from an administrator at NC State. He was the one who was emailed in August about the concerns of heightened cancer within Poe Hall. That was in August 1st. On September 18th, he sent that Poe Hall employee this email. I reached out to the university's Office of Environmental Health and Safety. After a couple of times of running into a dead end, I finally spoke to somebody. That was 5 weeks after she said, hey, can you do something about it? So we're not only seeing delays from NC State with external agencies, but also internal agencies.
Keely, it's 1:30, so this is our last question.
What do you have to say for that?
I'm not aware of that. I mean, I was aware that employees had expressed concerns about cancer within the building. I do know that when Environmental Health and Safety understood that they reached out to DHHS, and DHHS suggested we reach out to NIOSH. We ultimately started testing for PCBs. We got those results back late October, early November. As soon as I was informed of that, we made the decision to close the building down.
Can I ask 2 more questions? We were told 30 minutes.
It started at 1. Yeah.
Are you worried about lawsuits?
Do I worry about lawsuits? I'm a chancellor of a university. We have litigation that we're involved in all the time. But I don't manage based on lawsuits. I manage based on keeping the university operational and protecting the health and safety of our employees. We closed this building down not because we were worried about lawsuits, but just the opposite. We closed it down because we wanted to understand the environment so that we could help our employees understand what they had worked in for several years. And we wanted to understand what we needed to do to fix this.
If you're not testing buildings and you're not responding to people who are no longer affiliated with the
I didn't say we weren't
university.
testing buildings. I said we need to understand what this situation is. We need to understand the new guidelines that just came out less than a few weeks ago from EPA. We need to develop the protocols consistent with those guidelines, so any testing we do is consistent with EPA regulations.
What can you say to parents who are sending their kids from all over the world to this university without proactively testing buildings, without providing students with the ability to test PCBs
I can tell
within their own
them
body?
that we're going to do everything we can, and we are doing everything we can to keep this university a safe and healthy environment for all of our students and all of our employees, and that's been true for over 140 years.
Are you worried about the reputation of this university?
I'm not worried about the reputation of this university because I know we're doing the right thing, and we're doing it based on sound data, and we'll be providing all of our employees with sound information.
That's a good place to close.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Yep.